Hello and good day everyone. Today we're going to look again at X-Plane 11 and the Cessna 172S that's built in, the default aircraft in X-Plane 11. And we're going to look at flight planning, GPS route, flight planning and programming the GPS route, having Autopilot follow it. And this time, I did a video yesterday. This time today, we're going to use an ILS approach instead of a RNAV or GPS approach at the destination airport. Also today we're going to utilize the OBS button on our GNS 530 device, which is X-Plane's modeling after the Garmin 530 probably. And I'm going to plot a route that is going to specifically have us need to use the OBS button here so that we can get an idea what that does, why it's there, and why you would need it. We're at Airport KBLM, which is Monmouth Executive in Jersey, and we're going to go to Long Island MacArthur in Islip, New York on Long Island. And we're going to plot a path that specifically keeps us out of the airspaces for JFK, Newark, and LaGuardia, because I think you would really try to avoid those airspaces if you don't really need to be in them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go via this GPS waypoint called MOVFA, and then from there we're going to turn and we're going to go to this GPS point called SHIP, and from there we're going to go up towards the airport here. So it's really as simple as, well, first we got to get some power to the to the avionics and click the flight plan button. Right now the flight plan is empty. It just has the airport we're sitting at as the default, which is what we would expect. You'll notice it's highlighted, which means the outer ring here is going to move what is selected, and the inner ring is going to go into edit mode on what's selected. I don't really want to change that, so I'll hit the clear button. I didn't show this yesterday, but you can also click on this and it will pop out into a nice 2D view, which you might find easier to use. I don't actually, because it's a little bit hard to get your hand on the inner versus outer ring here. As opposed to here, it's pretty easy. And if you want a better view, I have a view set that puts your head kind of right in the middle of the cockpit. Speaking of that, you should set views how you like. The W key is the default view that whoever designed the aircraft, this is what they think the pilot's view should look like. I always adjust that to where I would really want it, and set up a few views that tilt your head up and down and whatnot, and get your view over the equipment that you're going to be operating. So I said we're going to go from KBLM to MOVFA. So I scrolled down and now I want to edit, and I do that with the inner MO and then the outer ring here moves you to the next position. And it's smart in terms of it knows what you've typed so far and what you're on, and it'll start making suggestions, and that's not what we're looking for, so we need to go a little farther, and there you go, MOVFA, and it picks for us automatically this one, and that is the one we want, so I'll hit enter and hit enter again to accept. Now our waypoint is in there. And from there, I said we were going to go to this waypoint called SHIP with 2 P's. So again, I want to highlight the blank one. Use the inner ring and spell out, move the cursor, move the cursor, move the cursor, and find the P's, and that's the one we want. Now we have those 2 points in, and from there I'm just gonna put this waypoint. Should get us in the neighborhood close enough, and still from ship to that point. I'll put this one. Will keep us out of that airspace. So VC 236. So I want to edit the blank one. Go to the what was it? VC, I think it was VC. Two. You can scroll backwards if the number or letter you're looking for is 236, wasn't it? And there it is. And we should put the destination airport, which is KISP. Oops, I passed it. The I's. And there we have it. And if we exit the flight plan programming mode, we can see, if I pan out enough, we should be able to see it, but now it's behind us pretty much at this point. But what I would expect to see is the first leg to this become the active leg, and right now it's not. That's fine. We'll taxi, and it will probably automatically set the next leg to active. Now, as part of my checklist for powering up and getting the aircraft in the air, I should always remember to set my gyros, and I do often forget. You'll notice the magnetic compass is approximately on 300 degrees, maybe just a hair under. Look where the gyros are right now. Not even close. That's going to cause us a problem. I'm going to forget, and we're going to take off without doing that, and you'll see what the problem it causes is. In terms of fuel, we probably have enough. We've got 2 hours worth of fuel. And our trim is where it needs to be for takeoff. Gonna do everything right, except I'm gonna forget to set the gyro. Well, if you follow the checklist 100%, there's probably a lot I did wrong. Like not hollering out the window, clear. We'll turn on some lights. Even though it's daytime. And here lately I've gotten in the habit of going ahead and running the engine up a little bit. You should see your vacuum get in the green. You should see everything in the green as you get to around 2,000 RPMs. And specifically, I've gotten in the habit of going ahead getting my mixture a little more correct. See how EGT is nice and high here. Fuel flow has come down a little bit. And if I pull this mixture out any further, you see that RPM needle starts to drop. So we want to go push it back in and leave it about right there. And I'll turn the yokes on so that you guys can see where the controls are today. And we should probably listen to the pre-recorded stuff, get the weather and whatnot. Aviator's tablet, I can't recommend it any higher. It's great. Search by your airport, and then it'll get you things like the ATIS pre-recorded messages and whatnot. We want 121.625, which is already here. We'll give it a listen. Oh, it's not the active one.
Executive weather. Wind 250 at 6. Visibility more than 10. Sky conditions 1,600 scattered. Temperature 25. Dew point 22. Altimeter 2994.
That's about 2990, 2992. There's about 2994.
Monmouth executive weather. Wind 25.
And I don't think they gave us a runway assignment, so we're just going to pick one that points us in the right direction. Click this little hamburger menu and you'll get the charts. There are no departures for this airport. There is an airport diagram. I have Navigraph subscription, and Aviator's tablet integrates nicely with that. So I have all the charts I need right at my fingertips. You saw me earlier looking at their web-based, Navigraph's web-based charts, which I do use as well. But I really want something in the aircraft that's not an external app, so that I don't have to keep alt-tabbing back and forth and whatnot. So we're going to taxi and take off. Oh, we'll make it easy on us and just take off right here from runway 3. Taxiing from the general parking of this airport is never fun because the terrain is not defined as asphalt like it should be. Yeah, I don't think that actually goes to the runway, so we're gonna taxi in this direction. You usually don't have to use that much throttle just to get the plane moving from its parking spot, but you do when the simulator thinks you're taxiing on grass. In the interests of saving some time, I'm just gonna taxi right to that runway intersection, and we're gonna take off from there. We don't need that much runway. This really isn't a taxi and ground operations video. See, now it's rolling like it should. I don't usually take off with flaps on. Now you'll notice that I also have omitted something else, which some are going to catch on to. Specifically, what I didn't do was put my mode here and down here in the CDI button into GPS mode. But we'll pretend I never caught that and didn't fix it. I also see that we're in suspend mode here, which is kind of strange, but we're gonna pretend I didn't notice that either. I get the plane rolling and see which way it wants to which way it wants to windmill. Use my rudder to counteract that. Then apply power. And I lift it off the ground kind of briskly. And start trimming for climb. And you can see we're actually crossing our so let me put heading where we're at, put it in heading mode here, put it in climb mode, but not at 1,000. And if I put us in nav mode and GPS steering mode, it should intersect that, right? Seems to be doing it. And we see the magenta line did change, like I said. It still says suspend. I'm going to hit the OBS button until that suspend goes away. Now look what's happening. It's taking a rather steep intersect angle, isn't it? Oh my goodness. What's gone wrong? Alright, so we go back into heading mode so that we don't keep going somewhere we didn't intend to go. Adjust the heading bug kinda in the direction of where you want to intercept that, and you figure out what you did wrong. And there's a couple things. One, I'm still in VLOC mode, but that's not it. The real problem is I never synced my gyros. And in fact, we're going to put it in nav mode again, just to show that not having this in GPS mode wasn't the problem. Now I can't even see my plan, and it thinks it's on the track apparently because it's leveled off. So what's going on here? Oh my. Well, again, we want to turn back in the general direction of where we wanted to go. And it's not that I didn't open this message and do what it's saying. It is simply because I failed to synchronize my heading indicator, my gyros, to the magnetic heading before taking off. So we're flying about 80 degrees by magnetic compass, and our heading indicator thinks we're flying 300. Yeah, that's bound to cause some really unexpected autopilot. Now it's turning because my heading bug was still there. So what we want to do is basically align these while we're flying and then try again. 30 degrees there. This is saying we're tracking 32. So we're still off a little here. Put that about right there and call it a day. Move our heading bug back. And now, if I put us in nav GPSS mode, it's basically gonna take a more appropriate intercept angle and get on that path. But I see that's not magenta. Oh, because we already passed MOFVA. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and set ship to be the active leg. And as soon as we do that, now that line is magenta and the autopilot and the GPS is doing exactly what we want it to do. So pilot error, not setting the gyros during pre-flight. I would imagine a lot of people get bit by that, and that's what holds people back from being able to learn how to really use the avionics and the autopilot in this aircraft. We're going to level off. 3,500 is a good cruise altitude. These messages pop up. It's saying set your course to 94. We talked about this yesterday. You should do what it's saying, but if you don't, it'll still work. 94. Oh, 90 is E. So just about right there. It's a good practice to have your CDI course set to what your GPS course is. It's also a good practice to move your heading bug in the same direction. Because at any point, things tend to change. Maybe air traffic control tells us turn right heading 150 because we're about to get too close to another aircraft. Well, that's easy to do when I've got my heading bug already there and I just hit the heading button. If I didn't have this set and the heading bug is still 180 degrees, it would take me longer to move the heading bug, etc. And it's just a good practice to do what you just saw me do. Now, we'll go with that pretend situation. And eventually we're going to need to get back on course. And whatever situation, now we're told, proceed as filed. Or resume own navigation. Oh, and I see I didn't trim the aircraft. Look at this. I want to trim my rudder so that is centered. Looks like we just got a weather update. Alright. And I never revisited the mixture now that we're at cruise altitude. Probably needs to be leaned out a bit more. You heard the RPMs just start to drop, so I pushed it in a little bit. We're also way over The cruise RPM should be about 2,500. It certainly shouldn't be in or over the red. Alright, so now to get back on course, we have a couple of options. Our GPS knows our planned route was along that, so if I simply just go back to nav mode, hit it twice to get in GPS steering mode, it's going to turn and re-intercept that original planned path and then fly along it. I'm going to go back into heading mode, and then it's going to turn back again to 150 because we still have the heading bug set there. Perhaps you don't want to go back to the original path. You could also simply say, I want to go directly there. Hit the flight plan, make sure that the waypoint you want to go direct to is highlighted, and hit that button. And then say activate, hit enter to confirm it. And now you see our new path is right from where we are right here. Go back to nav and GPSS mode, and that will simply take us direct to it. Now, either one will get you where you were going. It's not really the end of the day which way you go, but your original path probably was planned such that you were on a defined route, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to get back on that. But look, we've gone so far, it makes better. Oh no, we were going to ship. I was going to say it makes better sense for us to follow this radial or this route, but yeah, we were trying to avoid this airspace altogether, so we're going to continue to ship as planned. We no longer need this. We really no longer need anything from KBLM. And instead we're going to put in KISP. That's where we're going. We're eventually going to want to get ATIS, so 120.75. It's already here. I just need to bump it to the top. Oh, I was going to say we're not close enough, but we are. Altimeter.
Sky conditions 1000 broken, 3000 overcast, temperature 2.19. Altimeter 2993. Arriving runway 24.
2993 is about where we had it.
Advise on initial contact, you have Romeo.
And they want us to take runway 24, which I was hoping we would get runway 24 anyway. And Aviator tablet also gives you weather in the format of standard aviation METAR format, and you can reference that. It makes a lot of sense to do so, but only if you have your simulation settings to follow real-world weather. Otherwise, what it says here isn't going to match what's in the sim. I'm pretty sure. I think this follows real-world weather. Not getting it from your sim. And runway 24 is, there's our arrivals here, but we're not gonna do an arrival today. Here's an overview of them, and we're not coming from any of the directions where following a standard arrival would make sense. So that's why we're not going to look at that today. Approach, we said runway 24, and since this is an ILS demo, we're going to use the ILS approach. And now we're getting close. we're proceeding to our waypoint ship. I have a message here. It's probably just telling us, it's telling us we're near an airspace. But yeah, it wants us to set our course again. Like I said, good practice is to also keep your heading bug on the direction you're going. And let's look at the bigger map for a second, and I'll explain what we're going to do. Our plan, and it's not here because I didn't define it. We could have done that, but that's really not what this video is about. We're going to proceed to this waypoint ship, and then our plan next takes us to this VC253 waypoint. But one of the nice things you can do with Navigraph is you can overlay. We're going to click on the airport where we're going, and this comes up, and this little button here will get you access to all of the charts and maps for that airport. And like I said, we're going to do a runway 24 ILS approach. This button here will overlay this chart right on top of our bigger map, and that's what I wanted to do. You can see that matches what I've pulled up here in AVI tab. But what I want to look at this for is to see, well, our planned route from ship to VC253 will take us here, but where they really want traffic to kind of funnel through to this approach is this point, Calverton, CCC. So what do I do when we get to VC253? Do I just put Calverton in as the next nav point? I could certainly do that, but then we would fly right through here. And since this is a published approach and they have this, I'm gonna guess that they probably would prefer, and ATC would probably require you to actually fly along this. And that's what we're gonna do. But it's time to start looking at the procedures and getting our GNS 530 programmed. We want to hit the procedures button. It knows we're going to KISP because we put our flight plan in. Select, well, let's look at select arrival. We already said we're not going to use any. You know, Loves 2 and Nelly 3, we could select those, but like I said, those are for coming from the north, and that's not where we're coming from, so we're not going to use an approach or an arrival. We are going to use an approach. And we're going to select ILS 24. And there's two options, load or activate. And as soon as you hit enter after selecting that, oh, and two options here, either vectors, which would make sense if you're under ATC control. That just basically means that your own navigation or navigation at the direction of ATC, and then when you're done doing that, you'll activate it. But we already said we want to go to CCC. So rather than just tell it we're going to vector to it, we're going to go ahead and choose it. And when I hit enter, now the two options, load or activate. I usually load and see what it looks like. Now in our flight plan, we're still going to ship, then VC236, but now it has us going to KISP and then to CCC. That's not really what we want to do. from ship to VC236 is the one I programmed. Then it wants you to go direct to ISP and then over to there. That's probably not what you would do in real life, fly right over a very active airfield. So that's not what we're going to do. So from my flight plan, I'm actually going to remove by scrolling down to it and hit clear. Are you sure you want to remove this waypoint KISP? Yes, I do. Now our flight plan will no longer take us, I didn't mean to click on that, but since I did, now our flight plan will no longer take us to KISP, but it also will not take us direct to CCC. And the reason is because my flight plan ends there. It's not going to proceed here until I tell it to activate this approach. We'll wait until we're at CCC. Oh. And then I'm going to show you what we're really going to do. Well, not when we're at this C236, but when we're a little closer. And we should think about our descent. We have this VNAV button. Again, it's worth iterating that the autopilot in this aircraft does not control your throttle. The pilot always has to control the throttle. And it doesn't have the kind of navigation system in autopilot where you can program an actual VNAV profile and then the autopilot will just fly it. It basically has a descent calculator. And let's look at the approach as it's published. It's just a little bit easier to do it from here. There's a lot of important information on these approaches. The ATIS frequency, various frequencies for the tower, ground, and approach, etc. The airport elevation is kind of important. Where you will intercept the glide slope is going to be this riser waypoint. The final approach course is 239. You also get that from here. You also get that the glide slope intersection point is here at riser. Then in this section you have a lateral diagram of the course that you'll fly, and we must have just reached ship, and now we're turning. So yes, it's going to tell us to set our course to something else, and even though it doesn't tell us, we've already said it's a good practice to also set our heading bug. Continuing about this approach diagram, this is the lateral diagram, the course that they want us to fly. Usually you have a hold point. This is where they stack them while they're all waiting for their turn to go. Then when they're cleared to proceed, they go on this radial to this point, 239, to get on the approach course and intercept localizer, and then here they'll intercept glide slope. Has nothing to do with altitude or vertical. The next section does. They want us to be at 2,000 feet when we get to Coram, and we can see from this diagram also that they kind of want us at 2,000 feet when we get to Calverton. We're going to do that by hitting VNAV and say the target altitude 2000 is already set. MSL is correct. 0 nautical miles before basically means at that point, and we want to highlight this field and then use the enter to pick Calverton. Uh-oh, Calverton's not even an option. What have I done wrong? Well, I haven't told it yet to do anything beyond VC 236. So we're going to hold that thought. And talking about the approach diagram chart a little more, they have the altitude that they want you to be at Coram, then they show they want you to descend at a 239 degree descent angle. Oh no, that's not the descent angle, that's the heading. But basically between Coram and riser they want you down to 1400, and then you maintain 1400 until you intercept the glide slope, and from that point on you follow the glide slope in. Ground speed in knots, and yeah, you want to learn all of this stuff at some point. But for the casual to semi-serious flight simmer, you don't need to really look at that stuff too much. But what you do need to look at are any notes. Missed approach. What do they want you to do if you balk your approach? Well, they have a missed approach over here, and they want you to also miss approach, and I mean you're going to be pretty close to the runway usually when you say, hey, we need to do a missed approach. So they want you to continue runway heading, probably climb to 2000, then they want you to turn this 100 heading and then come up this radial. But there's an important thing here in the notes. Autopilot coupled approach not authorized below 800 feet. What does that mean? Well, it literally means you can use your ILS to 800 feet. After 800 feet, they want pilot to be manually flying the aircraft. There's good reasons for that. The main reason is because the ILS system may have a lot of interference lower than certain altitudes, and therefore it can't be relied upon. That's probably the reason here. So here we are, we're proceeding to this VC 236. What we probably ought to do is just go ahead and piggyback on this and fly this, but there's not a GPS nav point here. There's not one here. So that's the problem. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, we're going to go next to Calverton, and tell our navigation system that we want to be on this 41 degree radial. So we're gonna do that. If I activate this approach right now, it's basically gonna want us to go to CCC Calverton on the 72 radial, which is probably from right where we're at now. And that's not exactly what we want to do. But for now, we're going to activate that approach. And you'll see what I do. Procedures, activate the approach, because we've already selected one, hit enter. And you see the magenta line is drawn from right where we happen to be straight to Calverton. And the GPS will guide us, and the autopilot will follow that radial to Calverton. And I'm sure the message thing is popping up saying set your course to whatever. And we've also said we're going to follow good practices and also set our heading book. Now here's what I want to do. I said we were going to look at the OBS button today. That's what we're going to do next. I'm going to use this OBS button to tell my navigation system that I want to be on this radial 41. And that's what I'm going to do with the OBS button. We're already headed. Our next point is Calverton. Oop. Hit the wrong button. OBS. And well, let me undo that. The GPS and the autopilot will put us back on that same line we were on. I want to select. I think I want to select 41 here and hit OBS. We probably need to scroll in a little. That's not really what I'm expecting. Yeah, that's not what I'm expecting. That's odd. Now look how it moved. I'm still on 41 here. That's what I expected. See how now our magenta line lines up with that line. That's because I selected 41 here and I pushed OBS, which will override and tell the system that we want to intercept and fly to Calverton on the 41-degree radial instead of from whatever point we happened to activate the approach procedure. And what that's going to do is it's going to put us right there. It's going to put us right there on that point. And then from there we're going to fly to Calverton. We're not going to do the holding because it's really nothing special, and time, I want to be respectful of your time. But we were talking about descent. But I'm going to wait until we've intersected this radial 41, because what I want to do, well, it already considers us having started this approach. So yeah, it'll work. Go back to the VNAV, 2,000 feet MSL, 0 nautical miles before, which effectively means at, and waypoint. Now the waypoints on the approach are showing up. We'll put CCC. The descent profile usually is about 700 or 800. No, I think it's a little higher in this aircraft usually. We'll make it 1,000. So it's saying you're going to start your descent in 8 minutes 56 seconds. I reckon I could have chosen a smaller flight plan for today. Just glancing at things like rudder trim and whatnot. RPM, so we can bump that up a little bit. That'll get us there a little bit quicker. Fuel looks low, but that's plenty of fuel, no problems. Everything's in the green. Green. We're getting close to our intersect. And you'll see the aircraft. Once it reaches that point, it will turn and steer towards Calverton, just like you would expect. Now, we've been in GPS mode this whole time on this CDI button. What would happen if we weren't? Well, right now, nothing. To be honest with you, yesterday and today I've played with trying to find scenarios where not having this in the GPS mode really messes you up. Well, probably because we're still in GPSS mode down here. Yeah, if we were just in nav mode, yeah, look how it's just going wherever now. So I think it's more about being in GPS mode down here. In any event, when your next waypoint and the path you're trying to intersect is a GPS nav path, you should be in GPS mode here. We'll be in GPS mode until we get here and turn onto our approach heading. And then we'll go to localizer mode to use the ILS, which by the way is a radio navigation system, not GPS. It is considered a precision approach, so you can do ILS guided approaches in extreme weather. Probably not in this aircraft, you wouldn't want to, but from a navigation standpoint, you certainly could. Well, while we're waiting here, rather than have dead air, earlier I flew this, and when I turned, well, I say when the system turned onto this final approach heading, we have a message. Airspace near and ahead. Yeah, we understand. You would normally contact and follow ATC. That's not what this video is about, though. Well, the problem I had earlier was when the system turned onto this, it was fine. But when I went into localizer mode and put autopilot in approach mode, I expected it to track the localizer and stay on that course path, and instead it went off in some random direction. And I clearly had done something wrong. But instead of sit there and fly around in circles, I manually took control of the aircraft. I put the heading on this, and I executed a missed approach. Came back around and tried again, and in the meantime I said, well, let's figure out what I did wrong. A lot of people may not even know that in your X-Plane installation, under your X-Plane directory, under aircraft, Laminar Research are the ones that come with the product, and this Cessna 172 SP, there's typically a number of PDFs in the directory. This is documentation. In real life, you wouldn't just hop into a Cessna without having previously studied the pilot's operating handbook and probably been ground tested on that, and then had many hours of private one-on-one hands-on instruction. You wouldn't just fiddle with buttons and try to figure out just by pushing random buttons how to get stuff to work. Yeah, there's actual documentation here. We're using the GNS 530, the top one. Yeah, they give you two. There's the 430 down here. I've never used it. Don't know when I ever would. I'm sure there are good reasons it's here. Probably as a backup. I think it's on a separate electrical bus, so that if this one goes out, maybe this one remains, and I should probably train and understand how to use this one. I'm sure I could muddle through it if I needed to. But we want to look at the manual for the G530. It's a PDF file. It's got a table of contents. Everything I've talked about the past few videos it's all here. How to program the flight plan, how to do everything we've talked about. Probably what we've talked about and then some. Like standard instrument departures. We didn't do that today. We didn't do that in yesterday's video either. We didn't even follow a star today for standard terminal arrival. And then autopilot operations. Well, their documentation covers this equipment installed in the King Air C90, which isn't the aircraft we're currently flying, so that doesn't do us a whole lot of good. But where I went wrong is I said, well, yeah, I guess that's an autopilot problem so I opened the manual for this autopilot system as tech, and I looked at its table of contents and I said, well, what didn't work as I expected it to? ILS localizer tracking didn't work. So I get to this page and quickly my eyes find this. When flying an aircraft that does not have an HSI, like the Cessna 172 in the video, well, they're talking about their video, not the video we're doing today, but yeah, today we're in the Cessna 172. The pilot must now manually inform the autopilot of the ILS front course. This is accomplished by using the heading bug on the directional gyro. And then I smacked myself on the forehead and said, yes. Because these days I'm more used to flying aircraft that have an HSI. So all you have to do is program your GNS 530 for the approach you want to follow and put your plane in approach mode, and it just works. Well, what is an HSI? And what's the difference between that and what we have in this plane? Well, we have CDIs in this plane. From this indicator, you can tell if we're on the localizer lateral course. This needle will move side to side if you're off that course. We're not following it right now, that's why we don't see it. We're about to get to our and I never did the descent. So I said before, we're not going to do the hold. We're going to end up doing the hold. So the hold is an 85 degree. So we're going to set our heading bug to 85. And as we get about right here, we're going to go out of nav mode into heading mode. And now the aircraft is going to turn, and we're going to roughly follow this oval, which I think is a 1 minute hold, meaning you turn to the 85 degrees, and then you go for a minute, and then you turn to the 265 degrees. And we'll roughly do that. You have a clock up here. Never really looked at it too much, but you can set timers probably. Or we'll just wing it. Anyway, what I was saying is we have a CDI, not an HSI. This indicator, the heading indicator, or the gyro directional indicator, I guess it technically is, we can look at this and we can tell which direction the aircraft is heading, where our nose is pointed. It's not necessarily the ground track that we're tracking because of winds and whatnot, but we know from looking at this, our aircraft nose is pointed at approximately 85 degrees. And earlier you saw me forget to calibrate. So we always have our magnetic compass up here too, but when we're calibrated we don't usually have to refer to that too much. An HSI is one indicator that has the functionality you see here and this heading functionality all built into one instrument. And that's why when you fly an aircraft with an HSI, you don't have to do that step, which is, the documentation is literally saying, the pilot must now manually inform the autopilot of the ILS front course. This is done by using the heading bug on the directional gyro. To put it in plain simple terms, when we get on this course and we want to track the localizer, we also need to have our heading bug set to this 239 degrees. Then everything will work. So the fact that it didn't work earlier tells me that at the time I wasn't following my own advice, which is always set your heading bug to the course that you're intending to follow. So if you follow that and just do that at all times, you wouldn't even come across that problem, and you wouldn't have needed to refer to the manual to figure out what you were doing wrong. But on a good note, all the manuals are here. And I promise you, whatever problem you're having, whatever frustration, whatever thing you can't get the autopilot or the GPS or even the entire aircraft to do, the documentation needed is here. So we're going to turn now to that 265 heading. And still, I'm yapping my yap, and I haven't worried one bit about our descent. VNAV, it's probably telling us, oh, it's telling us now we can wait another 2 minutes. Well, that's if we want to descend at that rate. Let's put it at 800. So now it's saying wait 2 minutes. I wonder if that's even accurate. Well, I guess it is, because we're 4.5 minutes from CCC. So yeah, we have time to go another 2 minutes before we even think about descent. I've been looking at this every time we turn to make sure that the aircraft is flying in a coordinated fashion, meaning this ball is not way over here, which means that the aircraft is flying in a yaw. And I always adjust rudder trim if needed to keep that ball nice and centered. I have rudder trim bound to one of the controls on my Cytec X52 Pro system. Regardless of what yoke, joystick, or controller, or whatever you're using, in the Cessna especially, I find that you really need something that is bound just to the rudder. Not like the yoke, you can twist it, and when you're on the ground, that will move the rudder and steer. I find ground operations in winds to be a lot easier, being able to just move the rudder. Alright, let's... Oh, now it's telling us to descend. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go into descent. We said 800 feet. We're going to need to cut throttle. Otherwise, we're going to overspeed the aircraft. I'm not going to cut it too much because we don't want to spend any more time in this holding pattern than we need. But I'm not going to overspeed the aircraft. Alright, so we're getting close. And what we're going to do is we're going to get to about right here, and then I'm going to tell it to proceed on to this radial. Keep an eye on airspeed, because I said I was not going to overspeed the aircraft. And I almost did. And here on the magenta line is already, so I'm pretty sure if I just hit nav twice to get in GPS steering mode, it's gonna go where I want. Let's see. If not, we'll take control back and figure out what I've done wrong, but I think as we get closer to this point, it will have considered us having arrived. Yeah, if it doesn't start turning left soon. Nope. Not quite going where I expected. So we'll go to flight plan and we're going to activate quorum. Set it as the active leg. And now that's magenta like we would expect. And nav mode and GPS steering mode should get us on that radial as we would have expected. Oh. And we've descended way beyond the 2000 that we should have. I said before, Autopilot doesn't do all that stuff for you. You gotta pay attention. At least I caught it before we hit the ground. So now I'm climbing back up to 2000, and yeah, air traffic control would probably be getting my contact information about right now. To open up an inquiry in my competency. But we're almost there. Oh, a message, and look what I haven't done. I haven't taken my own advice and kept my heading bug pointed where it ought to be, and this thing is screaming at me for not having set this. Although it doesn't really truly matter. Well, it doesn't matter at this point in time. Would matter a lot if, for whatever reason, this screen stopped working. Then I will have wished, I would really have wished I had set this, so that I can continue manually following the course. And this. If if I had left that not set and left that not set, and this screen died. And now I've missed it again. It's just because I'm running my mouth and trying to cover important material while we're doing this. Now we've come down in altitude, so we're probably a little leaner than we ought to be. See how I pushed that in slightly and the RPMs went up a little bit. I'm gonna run a little rich until we get on our course. Descend a little quicker, and this time I'll really catch it. You just gotta pay attention and hit the altitude button when you get to the altitude you want to be. I'm so used to being in aircraft where you have an MCP panel and you set that altitude, and then the aircraft's autopilot and navigation systems won't cross that altitude. So you'd say, I want to descend to 2000, and you'd hit the descend button and be done with it. Alright, so we're about to get to quorum, and I was going to say it's going to turn onto this 239. And it's going to give me a message here reminding me that I really should have this on 239. And I talked about it earlier. I really want this heading bug also to be on 239. Otherwise, when I engage approach mode here, it's not going to go where I expect it to go. So I'm going to slow to 100 knots. And notice it changed itself over from GPS to LNAV and VLOC mode, localizer mode. That's because it senses the signal. We've got localizer signal, we've got glide slope signal. I know that because our needles aren't centered and I don't have an off flag here. So we're within range that we can pick that up. I also didn't have to set the ILS frequency. I don't know if that's automated or if it's because my radios were already set. Easiest way to get that is from here. Go to this menu from within X-Plane, highlight the approach and say to nav 1 and nav 2. And I said I wanted to get to 100 knots. We're a little bit under. I want 1 notch of flaps. And we were supposed to descend after we hit quorum, and we didn't. So we will do that now. We want to get to 1400 for this intercept is what we want to do. It may take a little bit of a steeper path. Well, we're under the glide slope. We can tell that from here. But we want to be under the glide slope when we engage approach mode, because it won't work if you're not under the glide slope. We don't really have any significant winds, which is nice. We're about to cross 1400, so I'm going to hit the out button. And I'm going to put us in approach mode. Watch what's going to happen. This will say approach, and this says Alt-GS. That means it's going to maintain the current altitude, but when it crosses the glide slope path, it's then going to change to following that. And you notice that when I put us in approach mode, the aircraft turned right slightly so that we can intercept the localizer course. wonder if I have the heading bug is on 240, not 239. And you can see it's starting to intercept the localizer path here. And it should stay aligned with that when we're in approach mode. As long as I've set the heading to the approach course. If I haven't done that, it's not going to work. I like to land with flaps all the way down, so I'm going to go ahead and get into that configuration. Going to need to bump up the throttle. I like to stay at about 70 knots on approach, 60 as we get on final. Well, I should say about 65. Gonna trim the rudder a little bit here. And we're coming up on riser, where we should expect the localizer intercept, and we see that happening here. Watch this panel. Well, it no longer says Alt GS, it's now in GS mode. It's gonna follow the glide slope. And I'm controlling throttle to stay at about 65 knots, or 70 knots I said, yep, 70. And you can see it's descending at about 300 feet per minute, which is inappropriate. And everything is working as it should. Very little wind. How do I know that? Because we're centered on the glide slope. I mean the localizer. And we're tracking 238 degrees. Our nose is pointed at 238. Our ground track is 239. So there's just a little bit of a crosswind component there, but not significant enough to make a huge difference in landing. And I'm managing the throttle. Airspeed's getting a little. And what did I say earlier? From the approach path, we're not allowed to be on an autopilot controlled approach lower than 800 feet, so it's about time for me to start getting manual control of this aircraft. And we'll go ahead and do it at 900. The aircraft is trimmed, it's on the appropriate heading, localizer and glide slope path, so I shouldn't have to do much, but it will drift a little bit when I release autopilot. And I'll probably have to trim it. And I'm going to manually keep it on that localizer course and glide slope path. We're a little under. I'm watching my airspeed because I don't want to get down into the low airspeed where I'll stall. And if I just pitch up to try to get higher so that I'm closer to the glide slope path, it will lose airspeed. So I have to give it a little bit of throttle. And that'll make it climb a little bit. And now we're on the glide slope, so now we're gonna re-establish the descent. And we do have a little bit of a crosswind. Not much, but a little bit. Now we're a little bit above the glide slope, but that's okay. We're about to hit the point where I'm gonna cut throttles and you'll see the descent rate pick up dramatically. I'd rather have this kind of an approach than one that comes in too low, because you lose an engine on final. When you're doing an approach in this manner, you have a lot greater chance of surviving it than if you're skimming the treetops. And I keep reducing throttle to increase my descent rate. Now it's time to start thinking about flare. Want to be in the center of the runway. And flare. And less throttle. I think we're on the ground. See, we didn't even hear it and feel it. And there we have it. Now it's good practice to vacate the active sooner rather than later. So rather than sit on the runway and fidget for my charts, of course, I could have had the chart up already. That would have been the smart way. To actually be prepared with the charts you need for the next phase of flight, right? And here we are right in the middle. Yep. That taxiway straight ahead is the one we're going to take, and we're a little low on fuel at this point. That's why the fuel lights are lit. Alright, we'll call it a wrap right here. So just to summarize, we made a flight plan. Specifically, we made a GPS flight plan from over here somewhere. It was Monmouth Executive. We did a flight plan from here. We programmed it into the GNS 530 as part of our pre-flight. We were going to fly from Mofa, then from there to ship. Pilot error caused some problems going to Mofa, and you saw how in the air we recovered from that mistake. Then we went to ship. Then from ship, our next point was SVC 253, but between ship and then I showed you how to actually get on this radial using the OBS feature here. We did that. We did a holding pattern while I talked through some things and descended. Then we went across this radial to Coram at 2,000 feet, got on the localizer, descended to 1,400 by the time we got to riser, and by the time we got to riser we were at landing, approach, airspeed, and configuration. And we saw the system transition from GPS mode, CDI here, to LNAV and VLOC mode, and we put the autopilot in approach mode and used it to manage our approach. But in this case today we only used autopilot down to 800 feet, and we took manual control because that's what the published procedure for that airport is. And I showed where you can find documentation where one can figure out what am I doing wrong that I'm not seeing what I'm expecting to see? And we made great use out of Navigraph's charts, both their online thing here and from within Aviator's tablet, which is a great plug-in, free, professionally developed, works, doesn't have any problems, doesn't kill your frame rate, works fine. X-Plane 11.50 beta 10 I'm using today, came out last night. No serious problems, very good. And I think that's a good summary, and for those that watched and followed through, I truly hope that something that was shown or spoken about today helps you in some way, shape, or form, because that's my intent.